Hello there and welcome back to my channel. A lot of you loved when I looked at classroom pictures submitted by my subscribers and offered feedback for organization. So we're doing a part 2. We actually have follow-ups for both of these submissions from the first video. I'm super excited to show them to you. And we're gonna take a look at 2 new spaces, and these are going to be home spaces.
Even better than my home. My home sucks.
Since it is currently summer, I figured that would be great for you to be able to apply some of the ideas to your own home. We're gonna start with the follow-ups from the first video. So first we have Renee. Renee says, here's an updated pic of my cabinet. It's not perfect, but it is better. Thanks for all of the tips. I love that the lower shelves are now upper shelves for class sets of scissors, etc. And the Sterilite drawer containers fit perfectly with a little space left over for reams of paper. I found the Sterilite bins for much cheaper than I thought they would be at my local Walmart compared to when I was checking on Amazon. I got a mini drawer for pencils and erasers. So, here is the before and after. If you want to hear my feedback for Renee, go back and watch the first video. I will have that linked for you, but it looks so much better. I just love how bright and colorful this cabinet is. And yes, with those Sterilite drawers, you can find them for different prices at different places, so definitely shop around. But I absolutely love how she utilized these drawers for some of those supplies. So you may have seen these Sterilite drawers in my classroom. They have paper size drawers as well as mini versions. So these are the mini versions. You can see the dimensions there on the screen. And if you're interested in the labels, those are editable and in my TPT store. But I use these to hold things like nurse passes. We had a school-wide behavior incentive program that we called Cub Kudos. So I had the cards available there. I also would use them to store things like binder clips. So I'm really happy that Renee was able to utilize those. And thank you so much, Renee, for giving us the update. The second one is from Kelly. So Kelly said, thank you so much again for all of your ideas and help with helping me reorganize my classroom space. I was able to take down the bar in the tall teacher cabinet and add a second set of Sterilite drawers, which has totally transformed that space and gives me the biggest smile when I open it up. I love hearing that because that's how I feel with organized spaces too. I also cleaned out and reorganized the curriculum cabinet and added a smaller Sterilite drawer to store my smaller pieces. My husband and I just recently decided we're moving from Colorado back to Texas, so I didn't want to spend the money on a drawer extender yet. So you may remember her cabinet. There was this bar located right here, and I had told her, like, you probably can go in and just unscrew it and be able to take it out. You can put it back in later. It's not permanent or anything. And I love seeing that she was able to do that. And she was able to get a second set of drawers to go on top just to really maximize that space. And then I love that she put these smaller containers on top in order to utilize that little bit of space. It just looks so much better. And look at those labels. I mean, come on, it's beautiful. And then here was that cabinet. Now, remember, this cabinet was very deep, and I had suggested possibly using a pull-out drawer in order to access the items in the back, but I completely understand not wanting to spend money if you're gonna be moving classrooms, but it just looks so much more accessible because there's less blocking those books and things in the back, so it's much easier to get to them. And I love, once again, those Sterilite drawers that is perfect for utilizing in order to store and organize some of those different like loose materials. So Kelly, bravo. Chef's kiss, it looks beautiful. And again, thank you so much for the update. Now we are gonna jump into some new submissions. And again, these are home spaces. So this first one comes from Valerie, which Valerie, I love her. She comments on every single video. So I was excited to see her submit this. She says, I need help with 2 cabinets in my kitchen, the dreaded Tupperware cabinet and my lazy Susan. I feel like no matter how much I empty, purge, and reorganize these spaces, it's always hard to get to everything and nothing fits in a way that makes sense. I need the space to not only make sense to me, but also to my husband and my teenager daughter. Putting things away in these two cabinets is extremely frustrating, and I swear that whomever invented the Lazy Susan was no organizational expert. It's such an awkward space to tackle. These two small spaces in my kitchen give me big headaches, and I constantly feel like I have to make giant puzzle pieces fit together, but they never do. Please help. P.S. I apologize for the poor lighting in the Lazy Susan. We're gonna take a look at this space, and Valerie actually submitted some videos as well as pictures. So this first video is going to be those pull-out drawers.
This cabinet is something I struggle with. I just never seem to have a good way to put anything in here. And this is where I like to keep my Tupperware because we use these containers a lot, but I just can't keep them organized, especially with a husband and a teenager.
Okay, so first of all, Valerie, you are too hard on yourself. That space really does not look that bad, and try to focus on the positives. I know I would be so happy to have pull-out drawers like that. It's like my dream in a kitchen. So keep in mind that your space is always someone else's goals, right? No matter how bad you think it is, there is someone else looking at it going, wow, I wish that I had that. But we're gonna take a look at each of those spaces individually. So let's start with that bottom pull-out drawer where there's a lot of those kind of little appliances and larger bowls. I would recommend for this space adding in some expandable drawer organizers, or dividers, I think is what they're called. So they look something like this. A lot of them are like a wood material, but you can also find them in plastic as well. And they are meant to fit a variety of different sized spaces because they expand, but obviously double check the dimensions. Here is actually what those look like in a drawer of mine. I use it to kind of separate some of my dish towels, and they're available on Amazon. You can find tons of different packs of them, but I would suggest adding those to this pull-out drawer in order to create almost like lanes, and you can then group the items together based on their width. So this is just an example, but you could maybe have like two longer sections, and then you could even put one going the opposite way in order to divide up a section. But I look at these like plastic bowls, and I feel like you could probably put those in the same lane because they're a very similar width. So it's not a perfect solution. Some spaces like this, there's going to be a certain degree of mess, and that's okay, but it might help you just kind of keep things a little bit more streamlined. And it would be simple for your husband and daughter to follow that because they can see the width of the lane and the width of the item and just kind of match it, if that makes sense. Then looking at that Tupperware drawer, listen, Tupperware drawers are always a struggle, and I'm convinced that they always will be a struggle. But here is my little bit of tough love. Looking at this, I feel like you maybe need to purge a little bit. I know I have always hoarded Tupperware because we know it stains, it gets damaged, it gets lost, it never gets returned. We always want to have extra on hand, but sometimes when we have too much of an item, it just becomes a struggle to organize it, and then you can never find what you need. So it really does more harm than good. So I suggest going through, getting rid of any containers that are missing the lids, getting rid of any that have cracks or are stained. And if there are containers you're holding on to be able to use, for example, if you're gonna take something into school and you're worried you might not get it back, like maybe you're bringing in food for like a school-wide event or something. I know we always did like a baked potato day, and we would all bring in different toppings.
Cauliflower and noodles, baked potato on the side.
You could take those containers that are like your throwaway containers, like it's okay if they don't get returned, and maybe store them somewhere else. That way, this can be just for those containers that you constantly use in order to put away food. Now, I will say personally that Billy and I invested in the Rubbermaid Brilliance containers. We have the glass ones, but they do also make plastic ones as well. They look like this. I really love that they are modular, so they're very easy to like stack and store because they're all a similar ratio, I guess you could say. And even though they're different sizes, I can fit 2 smaller ones on top of a larger one. And slowly we have gotten rid of our other plastic containers that we're no longer using because we like these much better. And we personally store the top right on it and then we stack them. But if you need to kind of maximize that space, you might want to consider getting some kind of a lid organizer like this. They make ones that are adjustable so you can kind of move those little dividers around depending on how many lids you have. But I would suggest taking one side and having that be all of your lids and then having all of the containers if you're going to store the lid separately. Of course, you can always store the lid with the container and stack them, but I think once you purge, it will be much easier to keep it organized. Now, the other space Valerie mentioned was a Lazy Susan, and I will agree these can be very difficult to organize. So let's take a look at the video and then I will offer some solutions.
Any tips on how to effectively organize a Lazy Susan? I just can't figure this one out either. This is where I like to keep all my lunch containers and also big cooking containers that maybe I don't use often.
So this is why I said I think you need to purge some, because that is a lot of Tupperware, and I get it. You have kind of separated them between leftover Tupperware that's gonna go in your fridge and then your school lunches. But let's be real, you're taking one lunch a day, and even over the course of a week, that's 5 days of school lunches. You have a lot of containers. And I know that there's different shapes and sizes and purposes depending on what you're packing, but I think if you purge and only keep your favorites, it will be much easier to keep organized. What I would recommend to you is to look into some Lazy Susan bins. You can go on Amazon and find a bunch of different ones, but they're essentially just these plastic bins like this, but they are shaped in order to fit in a Lazy Susan. So you will notice it kind of has that curved piece where it will all kind of fit together in the center. So measure the space, make sure you're getting an appropriately sized one. But this might be helpful for some of those smaller containers that are for like dips and sauces and things. That way they can all go in that container, and then you can maybe stack and kind of categorize some of the other bins that you have. That bottom one with all those large like casserole dishes, honestly, it's kind of one of those it is what it is situations. It didn't look that bad to me. So I think if you get those food containers under control with some of those Lazy Susan bins, it will make a world of difference. All right, our next submission is from Cameron. Cameron says, "This is my at-home workspace, and as you can see, it's a mess. It is so difficult organizing my desk. I find it so stressful. It's like every time I turn around, it is a mess. It's very overwhelming." So once again, Cameron, you are being too hard on yourself, because I look at these pictures and it does not look that bad. And I can tell you have systems that you have tried to put in place, such as this paper organizer, and you do have drawers, and it's a good size space. Of course, we can make some tweaks and improvements, but overall, it's not as bad as you may be thinking that it is. So let's take a closer look at some of the specific areas and how we can improve them. So one of the first things I noticed is that you have a lot of what I'm gonna call trinkets or decor items. So for example, looking at this little hutch piece, you have trinkets and decor items up top, you have them in this little crevice, and you might even have some down here. It's kind of hard to tell. But I would suggest really limiting those to one specific area of the desk rather than having them scattered everywhere. This was a mistake I made myself early on in my teaching career. My classroom was very overstimulating because I had little signs and cute ceramic pencils all over the place, but they were not serving a purpose. I suggest really choosing the items that bring you joy or give you specific reminders or are sentimental to you, and then limiting them to one area, such as maybe just on top of this like shelf hutch kind of area. So rather than having them also in here, they would just be up top. Now, you could always add like a shelf above the desk if maybe you wanted to have them completely separate from the desk as well. I can tell you have some artwork back here, so that may or may not work, but I suggest just limiting them to one area. And a really easy way to go about this may be literally just clearing off the entire desk. Like get a laundry basket and put everything in the laundry basket and then go through it piece by piece as you reintroduce it to that area, if that makes sense. Then as you do that, I suggest creating a purpose for each different area of the desk. So we've talked about having zones before, and that comes from the home edit where basically you're kind of categorizing your items. So I suggest having each area be a different zone. So for example, you have this drawer, that's gonna be one area. You have this little open section, that's another area. You have this section underneath. Each one of those needs to have a purpose. I can't tell you exactly what that purpose is because it depends on your needs, but I recommend maybe kind of categorizing your items as you take them out of that laundry basket, and depending on how big of a space you need for that pile of items, you can then determine what zone will be in each area. But a few ideas would be like quick access items, so things like paper clips and maybe tape and a stapler. You most likely want that closer to the computer, but keeping all of those items in one area so that you have quick access to them. You might also have an area to store extra supplies. So if you have extra notebooks or extra tape rolls, they can all go in one spot. And then maybe you have like a technology section, so extra cords and chargers and things like that. Then moving over to that paper organizer, remember our system is only as good as we are at maintaining it. So when I look at this, I don't see any labels, which may work for you, but one suggestion I would add is to have labels so that it makes it very easy for you to put things back in the correct spot. For a system like this, you have two different options for labels that I'm gonna suggest. One would be just printing a label that kind of has like, here's the top section, second section, third section, and fourth section. Literally, it can just be a piece of paper, and then you could tape that on the wall, like next to it, or maybe even if you wanted to tape it on top here, it just becomes something for you to easily reference. Or let's say you send your significant other or another member of your family into your office, you can direct them to the correct spot. It's kind of like labeling things in your classroom so that substitutes know where to find things. Another option would be to use binder clips. So if you take a binder clip, you can actually tape a label to that flat side, and then you can hook it onto the shelf. So it's a way to label the shelf without actually attaching the label to the shelf. It's a little bit more temporary. So give that a try, but I would recommend really having a purpose for each different section of this paper organizer. So this was an example. An inbox would be a stack of all the papers that you need to process. So whether it's things you need to follow up on, make copies of, or file away, it becomes a spot for you to put the papers so they're off of the main part of your desk, but you need to make sure that you process those papers in the inbox either daily or weekly. You might have a section for finance or personal or other. But I also noticed quite a few notebooks. I'm not sure if those are notebooks you constantly use or if they're just extra notebooks, but that goes back to what I mentioned before about maybe having a zone for extra supplies. That way you can kind of keep them out of that paper organization area. But that's going to be it. I will have the links for some of those organizational items I mentioned down in the description box for you. And if you want to submit pictures or videos of your own space, whether it's your classroom or at home, for me to maybe offer feedback on in a future video, I will have the link for that Google form down in the description box. You can also find it on my website. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. As always, thank you for watching. I love you so much. Don't forget to put your positive pants on, and I will catch you in the next one.